think we can get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Leena Sukumar. I am the ambassador for Chicago Booth Women's Network in New York City. And this is our first virtual event that we're putting together. So I'm super excited to be here. It's our spring summit, and the topic of which is personal branding. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. So we plan to have a presentation and Q&A by Cindy and Gerald, which will last up until 7:30 p.m. This includes the Q&A, as I mentioned, and from 7:30 to 8, all of those who have signed up for virtual networking, we will let you into breakout rooms and you will be able to network with a few other alumni and those who've signed up for this event. So all of the participants are currently muted. When you get into the networking event, I suggest that you turn on your video so that you can network effectively with all the other folks who are on the presentation. If this were to be a real life event, we would have been sipping drinks and having appetizers in Cindy's office in New York City, but I'm glad that we could open this out and have all of you join from different parts of the US and perhaps different parts of the world as well. So with that, I will give everyone a quick introduction on both Cindy and Gerald. Cindy is the founder and CEO of Glue Advertising and Public Relations, class of '82, Chicago Booth, and I've had the pleasure of interacting with Cindy on many occasions as a part of the Booth Alumni Network. She's a brilliant CPG trained marketer, and she began her career at Clorox and J&J before moving on to the agency side of things. She's also a board member of Chicago Booth Women's Network and very active in the NYC alumni board as well. She is also the East Coast chair for this year's New Venture Challenge, I believe. That's an introduction to Cindy. And our other speaker, Gerald Mosley, is the founder and president of CP&P Development. He is an accomplished Fortune 500 leader, now advising the C-suite, rising executives, and high-value teams. He really takes a hands-on approach to making sure that he elevates individual as well as group performances by drawing on his 25 years of US and global leadership roles. Gerald's goal is to help people have great weekends and getting in touch with their who. His philosophy is also that when you find a job that you truly enjoy, you will look forward to Monday mornings rather than be filled with dread on Sunday nights. With that, I'll hand it over to Cindy and Gerald to start their presentation. And I hope everyone sits back in their homes, enjoys, and please put in your questions in the question box when you have questions as the presentation is going on, and we will dedicate the last 30 minutes of the presentation to your questions.
Thank you, Leena. Nice to see everyone. Wish we could all be together, but it's great that we can be together this way by Zoom. And Gerald and I are going to be talking about personal branding. We're going to be approaching this topic a little bit differently. We're going to approach it in a very holistic manner by starting at what he and I agree is the beginning. So we have been frequent collaborators in this space, and we think the first step in personal branding is getting in touch with your personal who. And I now have probably stumped everyone in the room. You're wondering what that is. And what that means is doing some introspective work to determine what it is you really enjoy and the implications of that for the types of jobs that you might want to seek either within your current company or outside of your current company. So the idea is once you have a clear picture of your authentic self, you'll then be able to shape your personal brand. And that will put you in a position to be able to not only showcase your strengths, but to focus on something that's going to make you happy. So with that, Gerald and I have known each other forever, and I am so delighted to introduce him to all of you, my personal friend and collaborator, Gerald Mosley.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you very much. I'm going to basically take the screen over here. And I would tell you that it's really a pleasure to be able to speak to you all. And as Cindy has pointed out, it's really so important for this aspect. And as she said, that she's going to really cover all of the important pieces about what really you have to do to build your brand, the kind of the what's, the hows. And so it is really, really what I'm going to do is try to introduce you to and help you to think about and start thinking about this who concept as you start to put your brand together, because it's so important. And I use this quote to start because I have to agree with Mr. Warren Beatty in this comment that he makes, because I happen to believe that all of us, as much as possible, should try to spend as much of our time trying to play, actually, what we define as play, as much as possible. And so if you can figure that out, you're going to be really great. If you think of the extreme, think about what you might do if you did get paid for it. You just enjoy doing it. That gives you a little bit of insight about what we talk about when we mean the who. Now, it really was a pleasure reading through all of your backgrounds and your roles and getting to see what you do. And it was very clear that this is a really high achieving group. And I think that everyone's probably doing a great job. But the question to really ask is, are you really being your best? And I know that high achievers are always asking that question. And are you being all you can be? And that means really your current role of what you do, as well as when you think about future roles. Are you aspiring to be as much as you can be? And digging into your who will help you to really look at that. I'm going to make this bold statement and say or claim that knowing your who is really a key part to not just being your best, but it's about being as successful as you can be. And so what we're going to try to do is really look a little more detail. What do you mean by this who? And even though it's natural to some of you, and how do I really learn how to do it? How do I find it? And how can I really apply it? So I can be my best. And so important, again, I'll be like a broken record. When you build your personal brand, it's so important to this piece that people oftentimes miss out. So at the beginning in advance, you receive these questions. And these are great questions. And I actually got these from using them with some of the clients who I work with who are working on personal development, professional development, as well as some performance issues. And it's really one good way of giving you a window. It's one of the windows. Those of you who work on projects know that you have to look at the current state and kind of the situation analysis first. So this is a great way, and so to ask some questions. Did you fall in? If you think about where you are right now in your job, or even go back to when you were a new undergraduate, when you started, when you picked your major, or your first job, these are great questions to ask yourself to give you a little bit of window into what you were thinking. Did you just kind of fall into it? By that we mean clearly it's something that you weren't looking for, but it sort of found its way to you. You might have gotten lucky, or you might have gotten fortunate, or you might have gotten unlucky if it's something that really wasn't what you wanted. And then one of the reasons why this is so important is because oftentimes you can fall into things that will lead you to the next step, and then pretty soon you're way down the road in years, and you really aren't doing what you like to do or involved in the activities. And interestingly, when we took the survey, most of you didn't like fall in, but there was a percentage of you, about 20%, 25%, that said they fell in. The second place is that where you pushed or pulled in. And this is kind of more commonly what happens, is that sometimes you're not really sure, and people sort of persuade you or convince you, or even sometimes demand that you do something. If you think about starting school or majors, but in a work setting, oftentimes someone will say, I think you're suited for that. You might go that way. Or you yourself might say, this is what I think I want to do, or prevent yourself, but you don't really have all the information. And so you get pulled into something that really wasn't you. One of the expressions I use with people is that when they're looking for jobs especially, and you're looking at the green grass, I always say, you know what, there's always some brown grass out there somewhere, but you really don't see it until you get there. And that often happens sometimes. You think it's what you wanted, you pulled yourself in, but it wasn't really what you wanted. And then there's that took a dive. You actually knew. It's like, this is me. This is what drives me. This is what motivates me. And it was interesting that, and looking at some of the responses, those of you who responded, this was the largest group by far. And some of you even commented that you enthusiastically dove in. Well over 50%. So about 53, 54% of you dove into this. And that is really not that common, because quite frankly, you find people a lot of times saying maybe 30% that they dive in. So it's really good. You know, if you think about, I think about movies sometimes when I'm sharing examples, and I think about that movie, A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise, for instance. You know, he was a lawyer, but it was clear it wasn't something that he really was thrilled about. So I always wonder, how did he get in there? And if you, those of you who remember that movie, his father was a lawyer. Was that what pulled him in? Is that where he got into it? You know, and there's another movie I've used for examples, and some of you may be familiar with the movie Beaches with Bette Midler. And that's an example of someone who clearly knew what they wanted to do, sing and act, and getting into Broadway, and they dove into that. So you think about this, and it's really an important piece, and it's a question that shows your window. Because by the time you get to where you are right now, professionally, everyone has a profile. Everyone has this set of skills and experiences and knowledges. I call it a set, and traits and attributes that really define kind of what your experience has been, where you are. And this, when you think about building your brand, is typically what people will put in the brand, because this is who you are professionally. And so it's very important, with every role has a set of skills, experiences, and knowledge. This is what you're evaluated on. This is what you get interviewed to get on. And even as you develop your career and you're looking for future roles, it's usually what you have and what you're bringing in this set that's so important. So there's no question, when you're building your brand, your personal brand, these are factors that definitely make the bulk of it. But if you think about why we do some of the things we do and what influence these choices, you know, there's several factors. I call this the what. This is oftentimes what you're choosing. And quite frankly, these are the realities of what people make their choices on. Obviously, the top two, money, finances, security, and stability, that's real world. I mean, that's what we have to live. I mean, I don't know when the last time you went to Whole Foods and got some asparagus or some other produce and kind of gave them a high five as you were going out the door. You know, it takes money, and we need. And the same is true with stability, with position and status and control. You know, people think this is a negative thing sometimes, but it's not. Especially when you're a high achiever, you want to accomplish things, get things done, be in positions where you can make things happen. And that's what drives a lot of times, which are great, and which is part of your profile. Now, of course, when there's out of control or too much power, then obviously that's an issue. And then there's issue. This also allows you to do what some people want, which is to contribute, give. You know, that may drive you. And then there's a time when I have to take over the family business, or it's something that you really have to do. So those drive a lot of how we choose what we do. But when you think about this who piece, and you think about what's really driving me, what's really my values, what's important to me, what really matters, these are the things we don't oftentimes stop and think about. We just kind of go through, especially if you go back to, you fell into something, you got pulled. Sometimes it's several years down the road before you really evaluate this. But I think it's very important when you're building your brand to be your best, to think about these aspects. And the one on the bottom particularly, purpose versus passion. This is one that oftentimes people say, follow your passion, go with your passion. Well, the truth, it's been shown in many studies and people who look at this, look for your purpose. When you find that purpose, guess what? The passion follows. So they're definitely both important and they're connected, but if you can stop and try to figure, what is it that I'm really about? Some of you may be familiar with this concept of flow. It's a term that people in the positive psychology research area, social psychologists, sometimes people call them happiness psychologists. They talk about the state of flow. This is that state where you can think about a time, and that was one of the questions we asked, that you could think where you actually were so focused, so intense, that you lost track of the time. You couldn't wait to get back to it again. And if you think about this flow concept from a work standpoint, people who are experts, for instance, it takes years to become an expert in an area. But if you can develop an expertise in what you're doing, imagine that that flow is part of that expertise, well, then you are going to basically be increasing your chances of not just a bigger salary and more choice in what you do, better job conditions. You're really going to be in a position of flourishing, again, being your best. And that's what this flow, the more time it's been shown that you can spend in this flow state, the more successful you're going to be. And there's research on this. And guess what? We spend more time either at work, going to work, getting ready for work, thinking about work. And if you can be in a flow state or anywhere near where you're enjoying, think about it, how much time you spend. You're going to have a much greater professional and personal life. So this concept of flow is a big one. It's something to really want to aim for. Again, another great quote from another great business person. It's the same story. Find something you really love to do, and you really won't have to work a day of your life. You can't tell the difference sometimes between what work and play is. As close as possible, defined by you. So when you are looking at that what, and when you are looking at that profile and that brand that you're looking at, make sure you don't just look at the what piece, but take the time and include the who as you're preparing and as you're thinking. Now, the question you're asking, well, how do I go about that? It's not necessarily the easiest task in the world, because you have to stop. And sometimes one of my mentors told me you have to sometimes go slow to go fast. So you have to stop, be reflective. Think of some questions and exercises that are going to help you to try to think about those. Who am I? What really is important to me? Once you do some of that, also talk to other people, gain input from others who know you well. Sometimes they can spark you to think. But when you do find and you do the exercise, you're going to have to be honest and authentic with yourself and really say, this is me. This is what I want. This is not what I want. These are the activities I enjoy doing. And then it takes the courage sometimes to make the change and then to act on it. So very important piece. Here I have about 10 reflection questions for you to look at. Think about these things. Are all going to help you think about what is that who in me? What are the things that really matter to me? You go back to times in your lives, the things that you really felt. You know, you'll find that every single person has them in you. You just have to take the time to go back, and they follow a pattern. I've worked in many exercises and programs with people to help them do this. What outcomes have made you really feel proud? Your accomplishments. What sort of things do you find yourself volunteering on both at work as well as outside? What do you actually do? There's a theme when you look at these questions. What thing would you focus on that's not holding you back? Or money's not an issue. What opportunities really, when you have free time, what are you thinking about? What things can you not can't wait to get to? And then this is a big one you can ask every day. What are the things that really drain me? And what are the things that really energize me? You know, those are really important questions to think about, even with your current job. What things do you look forward to come? And I'm telling you, when you do the exercise, things will fall into a pattern, and then you can ultimately try to figure what is my flow, what gets me, what really drives me. So I want to tell you about an exercise that you can do as well. Taking that time, and this is not something you do in a week. This is something you spend time thinking about all those periods of your life, and think about those questions. And what you'll find is that when you do it, and I do exercises with people, and we find patterns. And you find patterns. You think of those situations, those times when you really felt that joy, that happiness, some of those questions we talked about. And do it in a very rigorous fashion. Set time aside, put it in a journal, do a period at a time. Don't rush through. Take the time. It's kind of an enjoyable experience, and do it on your own, and then talk to people. So a very, very important thing I think that we all should think about, we should do, and do that. My last slide really is really one that I use with clients quite a bit. I tell people this is a story of what it means for developing and even for performance. And interestingly, right in the middle of these tenets is the who. Know yourself. Know who you are by doing certain things. And what it does, it actually helps you in your current job. Maybe the things that aren't really working out as well for you are the things that really you're not suited. It's not your best. And also, certainly going to the bottom, it is what will help you know what you want to do going forward. So I'll just close with the same quote that I started. You finding your who really means, as much as possible, trying to connect and find out what's play for you, and that will be the way to go. Okay. So with that, I'm going to pass on to Cindy.
Okay, good. Thank you so much, Gerald. So now I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and let me see if I can page through this. There we go. Okay, good. So we're going to now shift gears, and we're going to move from your who to the how. And what I'm going to talk about is the value of personal branding and the process for developing your personal brand. Obviously, a lot of people think this is an important topic. We have a great showing tonight, which we appreciate. So here we go. Okay, so I think everyone would agree personal branding matters more than ever. There are a lot of trends in place that are the reason for that. One is the gig economy. Second is frequency of job changes and how many jobs people will now have in their career. The importance of referrals in getting that next opportunity. And the fact that right now it's virtual everything. And because of all of this, the job market is very noisy. It's more competitive than ever. And it's important that you control the narrative so your brand is consistently and specifically what you desire it to be. So just for fun, here are some famous people with strong personal brands. A personal brand isn't always a positive. It can be positive. It can be polarizing, and it can be negative. And the goal is for you to drive what you want your personal brand to be. The issue, as with any brand, whether it's a consumer products brand or whether it's you, is if you don't tell the marketplace who you are and what you stand for, the marketplace will define it for you. And here's an interesting quote from Jeff Bezos. He says that the most accurate representation of your personal brand, the way he sums that up, is it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. And the goal of today is for people to say about you when you're not in the room what you would like them to. Okay, so we'll move now squarely into process, which is we want to develop our personal brand. How do we go about doing that? Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to define what a brand is, even though everybody pretty much has an understanding of it. Whenever I start process, I always begin with that. And first of all, fundamentally, a brand is a perception. It's molded by a number of different things. Some combination of first impressions, communications, actions, and real life experiences. And while we're most likely to think of brands as consumer packaged goods products, think of Tide or Hershey's or Coke, brands are also organizations, services, and people. And when we talk about brands and we think about the process of developing them, we essentially approach it the exact same way. Here's what we use at my company, Glue, and it's called a feature analysis grid. And what this does is it helps us figure out, again, whether it's a consumer packaged goods product, a service, or an organization, what about it is most important and differentiating. The feature analysis grid, you can see there are two continuums. There's the importance continuum from low to high on the left, and the differentiation continuum across the top from low to high. And there are 4 quadrants within. So when we get together in a workshop or when someone who is developing their personal brand does a personal assessment, what they consider is what's important and differentiating about me, not from my point of view, but from the point of view of the target audience that I'm going to try to influence. That is their competitive advantage. And one thing that is an important takeaway from this grid is when you're branding yourself, when you're going for an opportunity, you have to consider that it's a competitive situation. It always is. So competitive advantage is upper right. Upper left would be cost of entry attributes. So these are features and facts about you, about a product, about an organization that are cost of entry. So from a personal point of view, when you are branding yourself, cost of entry attributes or features are information or messages you have to remember to tell the people you're speaking to so that you will be part of their consideration set. They might overlook the fact that you have this skill, and it might be absolutely fundamental for them to consider you for the job that they're thinking about. In the lower right, these would be attributes that are differentiating but not yet important. When you're thinking about your personal brand, and again, what kind of jobs you might be going after and the targets you'll be appealing to, what you have to consider is, are there some attributes I have that are different but may not be important to those folks who I'll be talking to, or they might be important to a certain subset of that group. So for example, let's say that I speak 5 languages, which I've always wished I did, but I don't. But anyway, assuming that I did, that might mean that perhaps I would want to go after an opportunity at the UN. So I would be applying something about myself that's differentiating that will be important to a subset of the universe where I might, go after an opportunity. Last is the lower left-hand quadrant. This is the discard pile. So these are features or facts about you that are important, that are not important and not differentiating. So the discard pile, one of the worst mistakes we can make in branding is to spend any time on attributes that fall here. Now, completing this feature analysis grid is not an easy thing to do. When we're working on consumer packaged goods or organizations or services, we usually do it in a workshop setting. When it's time for personal branding, this is a self-assessment that someone does on their own, but then typically I would talk to that person, or if you go ahead and do it on your own, tap into some people who know you well and have them give you their thoughts about how you have put this together for yourself, because honestly, we're usually kind of hard on ourselves. So to bring the process home, what I want to do is show you a case study. And this is a woman who Gerald and I both worked with, a senior female executive who had a 20-year career with one single Fortune 500 organization. She had experience in many different disciplines. She was in a situation where her current role was being phased out. And just want to mention to that point that it's always better to work on your personal brand before you're in that kind of situation. So here is a blinded self-assessment that she did. I have kind of consolidated a bit. It was larger than this. But I think the point is, when we look at the important and differentiating part of the feature analysis grid that she put together, there are a lot of very strong attributes here, but it's very general. So one of the things that you need to consider when you're branding yourself is you have to have not only high-level ideas that you want to communicate to people, but you want to communicate them as credibly as possible with proof points. In the upper left, where these were the cost of entry attributes, you can see that leadership is certainly cost of entry for a significant position, that, high-level position. She was going after something that would be C-suite or one level down from C-suite. That's a given. Consistent performance over having multiple roles over her career, a given. Learning agility, a given. The next one, this idea that she was selected to design and implement a CEO-sponsored global multi-year program that was going to strengthen the reputation of the company, that seems significant. And we talked about whether or not we shouldn't be teasing that out a little bit more, and if that shouldn't become one of her fundamental differentiators. Bottom right, we have here recognized thought leadership and selling excellence and employee experience and global and US experience. I thought it was interesting. First of all, she's going after a job where she would have global and US responsibility. So she certainly wants to talk about the fact that historically she's done that. And then as far as her thought leadership in a number of different disciplines, that was particularly important for her to be able to talk to in some way, because frankly, the fact that, as I said already, the fact that she had been at the same company for 20 years could be perceived as a negative in today's day and age, but the fact that she had a lot of different experiences over the course of those 20 years helps to offset that. And in her discard pile, she had the 20 years, and as I said, something that we had to address and offset a bit. Brings fun and humor to work. That's important as far as a cultural fit with the company. Instead of something you message, that's something that you certainly want to show in an exchange with whomever you're speaking to about an opportunity. So where we landed in this exercise was some of the differentiators just beneath the surface that we wanted to pull forward, was the fact that this woman was a change agent. And something she and I talked about that was not in her feature analysis grid is she had comfort with being uncomfortable. So she was willing to go into a role that was still being defined, where there was a very big ask, and consider how she could shape that role in order to deliver on that need. And that seemed to be significant to me, that she's not just a leader, but an inspirational one. I think leadership is defined in a number of different ways, and I felt that that was a good way to define it for her. The fact that she had worked on that CEO initiative and had been personally tapped to do that seemed to be significant. So the CEO relied on her, and in looking at other opportunities, that was, in a sense, a credential from a third party, and we often look for those in some fashion. And then the breadth of her experience, she's looking for something that's C-suite or one level down, that she has had a lot of different roles in the company in a multidisciplinary way, was important, because at a high level then she would be able to oversee that well and make effective contributions across the organization. We then move to how do we summarize this with some messaging. So the bolded part of this became her positioning. So the upper right-hand quadrant, which are the features that provide competitive advantage, you ladder up from there and try to turn them into an umbrella statement that they support. So she was a leader and a trailblazer in transformational change, sales management, employer brand development, and marketing. And you can see we decided to reflect the fact that she had global and US experience. We talked about the fact that she could consistently and quickly deliver exceptional results over the course of her career, but made it clear, so it wasn't just cost of entry, that this was in situations where the roles were strategic or tactical, and they were either well understood or still being defined. And then we talked to this point about her being an inspirational leader, that she's been able to elevate individual and team performance at all levels so that the success positively impacts the entire organization. Some further proof points, I won't get into the details of all this, but we took the CEO initiative and what she had done there and talked about some quantitative data that showed how successful that is, and that can always be helpful when you're talking results in a conversation where you're going for a job or you're developing your personal brand and then thinking about how you're going to message those. To be able to have some data that you can point to is very useful. And then from an execution point of view, as I said, the process of developing a brand, whether it's a person, a company, packaged goods, product, a service, it's the same from a strategic point of view, which is what we've just gone through process-wise, but when you get to execution, it certainly is different. So here's where execution for personal branding is to update your LinkedIn profile, to carefully curate social media posts and speaking engagements. What's great about defining your personal brand, not only do you elevate your messaging and how you're going to present yourself, but you can also then make decisions about where you spend your time. Does it make sense to speak on that particular topic? Well, you can use your personal brand as a yardstick to judge that. She also developed a networking plan aligned to her career objectives. And then something I think we all know intuitively to do, but I don't think we do enough of it, is do outreach to current advocates and make sure that they understand your personal brand and why you developed it that way and what you're looking for as a result, because they can help you find opportunities. So as far as what's next and how do you put this into effect, well, we've talked about the theoretical in a sense. We got more practical with the case study, but now for each of you, what I would say is the first step in developing your personal brand is to learn more about your personal who. Then you want to assess your strengths from the point of view of the target audience. Again, not what you think, but what others will view as important and differentiating about you. So that's using the feature analysis grid. Then communicate that specifically and consistently. Again, it's a noisy environment. So if you're not consistent and you're not always clear, it's going to lead to confusion. And then make as many connections as you can. So that's the networking piece within current advocates who you know will support you, and potentially new advocates through networking who, again, will appreciate your personal brand, and even advocates, and that some of the people who advocate for you, they become a part of your personal brand. The last point here in this continuum is keep at it. And the reason is personal branding is not something that you do overnight. A few fundamental truths about branding is brands live in people's minds. And so it takes time for brands to get there, whatever that brand is. And certainly it takes time for your personal brand to be clearly reflected in what people think about you. And another fundamental truth about branding is brand building is never finished. So that's it as far as the canned presentation, and we're happy to take questions.
Thanks, Cindy and Gerald. That was really great. I hope everyone got a lot out of both your presentations. I have a few questions here that I will read out, and others, participants, please feel free to send me additional questions. We have about 18 minutes or so, if we like, before we go into our breakout rooms and networking sessions. So the questions are related to what Gerald spoke about. How do you know when what people say about you when you're not in the room? What's the best way to inquire about this? And the reason people are saying this when I'm not in the room means that they don't want me to hear that specific, those specific attributes or whatever it is those discussion points are. So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, and Cindy, so you can add, but my perspective, this is a very relevant question to this and just in general in the workplace. And it really comes around to a trust issue, to be honest. People aren't necessarily going to feel comfortable, safe, or vulnerable enough to tell you what they're necessarily thinking. So it's going to be on you, if you really want to find out, is to think about the way you can ask the questions that are going to make the people feel safer and more vulnerable to ask. So you have to formulate the questions. That's what my answer would be. And we obviously don't have time to give examples, but there are ways to ask a question that are going to be able to give you enough that you can feel what they're saying.
Cindy, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that it's interesting. I read an article the other day on team building, and one of the exercises that this particular coach used was to pair people and have them talk to each other openly, go on a walk and talk about strengths and weaknesses and how they might help each other. And I think that if you seek out someone in the company who you feel will be honest with you and who you can trust and whose opinion you really value, to try to open up that kind of dialogue with that person. It won't happen overnight. To Gerald's point, I think it takes time to develop those kinds of relationships. But I do think that you can find some folks in an organization who are, you know, I guess part of the conversation, whatever conversation is going on, and who also might be willing to be honest with you.
Yeah. I'll just add that when working with clients, we call that either the hallway reputation or your water cooler reputation. And there's ways to try to find that out. So it's a very relevant question.
And then when you reach, related to that, when you reach out to current advocates that are in your realm of work or profession, what do you specifically ask them for?
Well,
you know, go ahead, Gerald.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead, Cindy.
I was going to say, honestly, with current advocates, I'm not sure you have to ask them for anything.
Exactly.
Were you going to say the same thing? I think that current advocates know who you are, and they're willing to advocate for you. And I think that you want to stay in touch with those people, and you want to continue to be interested in what they're doing, and they'll have a shared interest in what you're doing. And I have found that those kind of folks, when an opportunity arises, they pick up the phone because of the relationship, because they know what you're capable of. And yeah, you don't have to remind them very much.
Okay. Another question that came up is, are there any specific books or podcasts which can help one learn more about our personal who?
Oh, there are so many, to be honest with you. And as a follow-up, instead of trying to go through any specifics, I can provide to you all, as well as a couple of slides, like the questions that I had. Mm-hmm. I can provide those, as well as some book references that I usually will give to people that I'm working with from that standpoint. There are a lot of articles that really hit on some things and some topics to look at. It's really a lot. So I can follow up with some specific things.
That would be great, Gerald. Yeah, I typically find that there's a lot out there, and what do you look at, right? What's the most relevant to you? So that would be really helpful. Another question that came in, how do you reconcile a new who that leads to a career change with significantly lower compensation when you have financial obligations and goals related to healthcare costs, retirement security, children's education costs, etc.?
Yeah. Remember that this is a great one, because oftentimes you will realize what you're doing is not what you really want to do. But you'll find that when you actually come to that conclusion and you recognize it, it gets you to a happier place. Then you have to have a plan. Once you admit it and you're honest and authentic, your plan might be it's going to take you 5 years. It might be 3 years, but you have something to strive for. In the same way we went to college, no one wants to be in college forever, but you know there's an end game. And so people who can't get out, then you have to have a plan and break your plan down into steps. And then you'll have individual successes and you'll get there. But to say, I can't do anything and stay there, that you'll never be happy from that standpoint. And you won't be your best.
Yeah, I guess awareness is a first step towards making a change, right? So once you're aware and admit that there's something wrong with your flow, then it enables you to take the next step forward.
Correct. Yes.
Another question that came in, how do you transform your personal brand if it aligns to a certain industry, but you're looking to move to a new industry? For example, moving from hospitality, customer focus, to finance.
So I think in that case, you want to consider, okay, who is the target audience that you are now catering to? And think about your strengths that you have exhibited in your current role and how you might be able to maybe generalize them a bit. That doesn't mean that you move away from the proof points, but generalize them a bit so that they apply to the other role that you're looking for. So it's, you know, I think talking to people in the new industry can help you figure out how that generalization might work and how you can recast yourself based on your skills. But essentially, that's how I think it would work.
And let me add to it. I'm sorry that there was some slides at the beginning. I didn't know that you saw. You had to go through them quickly. But there was a couple of slides that I shared that talked about your set, the skills, knowledge, experience, traits, and attributes. And if every role has sets. You talk about competencies. If you could understand and look and learn what the set is, what's required, what's involved in that particular role, competency models are great for that. What do you actually do? What's required in it? That's one of the first things I would do to understand what the actual role is. And if you recall, well, in that last slide I showed with the tenets of development, one of the points in there is to say, make sure that you know what it is that you're looking at, and that what the skills and the experiences are required, and see where you are with that. How much of a gap from where you are to what that is, and then what do you need to do? Once again, what's the plan? Very relevant question. Again.
Okay. Another one that came in. How do you develop your personal brand when your skills aren't recognized at work?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. I think that sometimes we can feel that we're in a rut and that people are not recognizing who we are and what we're capable of doing. And that could frankly be a time to consider a job change. Maybe it's a different role in the current company, or maybe it's looking outside of the company. When you've been somewhere for a long time, it can be difficult to change your personal brand among people who feel like they know you and they have slotted you into a particular place.
Unless there was an opportunity for a project or something that specifically you could demonstrate in your skills, that is another potential way of doing it. But Cindy's correct, and it may be time to reevaluate, especially if you've been somewhere for a while. To rebrand yourself there might be difficult.
Okay. Another question. In a small geographic market, when your personal brand has been slandered by a person in power, what's the best way to build or rebuild your brand?
Yeah, I think that's a similar question to the one we just had, but I guess what I would do in that situation is I would look for advocates who have the ear of the person who has done the damage and who I feel I have a relationship with as well, and see if they might be able to bridge some of the, issues that are causing there to be a problem. I don't know. I mean, that's a very hard one.
Yeah, that is definitely a tough one. Another question that just came through. What's the best way to objectively suss out whether certain skills are differentiators or highly important when developing the feature analysis grid?
I think it's about talking to other people who are in the industry that you're interested in, and who might be the type of people who would, maybe they're not going to interview you for a job right now, but who would be the type of people who might be in a position to hire you at some point, or have hired people like you for the types of roles you're interested in. So I think it's networking and it's listening. And I also think it's looking at jobs that are available online and seeing what kind of language is used and what kind of skills seem to be prioritized.
Anything to add to that, Gerald? I know you, Cindy, the grid was something specifically that you brought up.
No, I think I would add to that. I think I agree with what Cindy's saying.
Okay. What is the best approach to find advocates?
It's a tough one too. It's a tough one as well. I mean, again, drawing from personal experience working with enough clients, and it's also matching someone who's of value. It's first of all identifying people that you think that you you have similar values, right? You have to watch people and learn and know what you want first. Know what really is important to you. And it doesn't necessarily mean that anybody who's an advocate may not be exactly the same way as you or see things your viewpoint, but decide what you want, where you want to go, and who do they advocate for other people. You have to go to understand who the different people are and try to find out, have they advocated for someone? Find out and talk to those people. And so that's a very difficult one, and it takes time. But you have to know what you want, and then you have to evaluate the people, honestly, and then learn about them, and then figure out a way to approach them. And direct approaching oftentimes is the best way.
Yeah, I would say that honestly, I think people who are likely to advocate for you are people who are secure in their own situations. Mm-hmm. So they are generous and secure, and they are looking perhaps to, because they've done well, they're looking to help the next level get ahead, and identifying those people. I think sometimes you might feel as if you can't approach them, and I think to Gerald's point, those people are very approachable. It's just, it has to be the right time in a sense, but I think if you maybe you do attend a presentation and someone who you consider to be a person who might advocate for you presents on a topic of interest, I think if you write to them and say, I found that really interesting, here's what I took away, would you be willing to sit down with me and have a conversation around this? I think most people will say yes, because you have found a meeting of the minds, you showed that you're interested, and I think most people will take the time.
Put a hat on as if you were looking to hire them. When you're looking to recruit, interview. And if you think from that standpoint, because that's what you are doing, and you should think in the same way that you would go after another candidate, much like Cindy said.
Yeah, would you also agree that coming from a place of authenticity, as Cindy, you mentioned, that makes a big difference in kind of establishing those relationships and finding those advocates?
So people are people. I mean, at the end of the day, we might be in a job situation, but fundamentally, I think people relate to other people who have similar interests. To Gerald's point, I think if someone is secure in their situation, they will have more time, perhaps more interest in helping someone else. So I think it's identifying who you think the person is at the core, and that I think will then allow you to evaluate whether they would advocate for you.
Okay, we have a few minutes left, and if you wouldn't mind, Cindy and Gerald, since you read through the Q&As that a lot of the registrants answered when they registered for this event, are there any general takeaways or anything that you'd like to share with the audience before we...
Cindy, certainly you can give yours. I really enjoyed looking through the backgrounds and the questions, and I tell you what I was struck by. In addition to the achievement, as I mentioned, not high achievers, there was a lot. I got a lot of giving. People really wanted to help and reach out and do something positive, which I saw, and that was a definite common theme. And as I said, the number of people who said they enthusiastically or they delve into this, it's unusual, to be honest. And so there was a theme also I saw of this idea of problem solving, loving to challenge, solve problems, sort things out, and do that. So it was really a lot more give than take that I felt in that group.
Yeah, I would echo what Gerald said. I thought the enthusiastically diving in percentage was super high. And, I mean, I think that when you make the decision to go to business school, it is an opportunity to reinvent yourself and do something you would really like to do. That was the reason that I went to business school, and I'm assuming that many people who went to Booth did it for the same reason. So I was not surprised to see it at all, but it was a higher percentage than I've seen in any other group that we've ever spoken to.
Yeah. You guys are real problem solvers too. I saw that. I read it. You really like solving problems and challenges, and that came through. And that's the work that I do, so I can appreciate it as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your views on that, and also for the presentations. I'm sure everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. With that, I'd like to thank you both very much for joining us on this virtual Spring Summit event. And as one other thing I wanted to say, I know there are a lot of alumni here. I'm not sure how many from New York, but I've been the city ambassador for 2 years, and I'm looking for someone to take over this role. So if anyone's interested in the role, please reach out to me. It's a wonderful, great way of engaging with the booth community here and being really involved with the alumni network. Thank you all, and enjoy your networking. Those who've signed up, thanks Gerald, thanks Cindy, and thanks to Denise for helping us put this all together.